Hello and welcome to part 31 in my Japanese for Beginners series. In this video we are going to cover the differences between wa and ga. This lesson corresponds with pages 195 and 196 of the Genki textbook, but don't worry, even if you don't have that textbook you can still follow along. では始めましょう。Okay, so this is the lesson that I have been dreading. Wa versus ga. We're talking particles, of course. And it is a question that beginner learners of Japanese will bring up towards the beginning when they learn about wa and they learn about ga, and they're like, well, what is really the difference? And then Japanese learners, some like to wear it like a proud badge, like, I know the difference between wa and ga. Do you even know the difference between wa and ga? And I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Most Japanese people don't get it right all the time. So to draw a comparison, it's kind of like how in English we have words, little connecty words like at, in, with, by, etc. And sometimes they're somewhat interchangeable, and most native English speakers couldn't even really articulate the difference between them in certain cases. Here is one specific example. I follow Jake Young. He's a translator also, a Japanese to English anime translator on Twitter, and he posted this a little while ago and I saved it for later because this is a chart, and it is graphing native English speakers who said excelled in sports versus excelled at sports. So as you can see, both of these phrases, they basically mean the same thing. They're both grammatically correct, and there are very subtle differences between, using excelled in sports versus excelled at sports, but most native English speakers couldn't really tell you the difference and don't really care. So just keep all of that in mind as you are learning Japanese in general. I mean, if you're gonna make mistakes, and if you make mistakes, you'll be forgiven for the most part. If Japanese is obviously not your first language and you're learning, most Japanese people are very gracious and they're just excited that you're learning their language, and they'll give you some room. But I know you clicked on this video not for a pet talk of, oh, it doesn't matter if you use wa or ga correctly, just be you. I know you clicked on this video because you really wanted to know the difference between them, so I'm just going to go over the very beginner basic differences that are outlined in the Genki textbook. So basically, as you are told in your beginner Japanese lessons, wa is a topic marker of a sentence and ga is a subject marker of a sentence. Now in English, we don't really have this distinction between a topic versus a subject. For example, here is an English sentence, Jane is eating carrots. So Jane is our subject of our sentence. The sentence is about Jane, and what she is doing is she is eating carrots. So in Japanese, you could write that sentence two different ways, with particle wa or a particle ga. Particle wa, Jane wa ninjin wo tabeteiru, and with particle ga, Jane ga ninjin wo tabeteiru. So spoiler alert, they're both grammatically correct. Both of these sentences mean Jane is eating carrots. So they're both correct, and they both mean the same thing. However, there is a slight difference. So the way the Genki textbook described wa versus ga in this case is once a subject has been dropped, once it's been mentioned already, then you can use wa, because now it has become the topic that we're talking about. Once it has been dropped as the subject via ga, then we can talk about it via wa, because we already know that Jane is something that we're talking about. So let's say that I'm eating lunch at the cafeteria with my friend Bob, and Jane is at the table next to us, and I haven't been talking about Jane, he hasn't been talking about Jane, he doesn't know who Jane is, and I just bust out with, Jane wa ninjin wo tabeteiru. He might be a little confused by that, because by the use of wa, because Jane who, Jane what, did you mention Jane earlier and I wasn't paying attention? So it would be more correct in that instance to drop the subject as Jane ga ninjin wo tabeteiru, and aha, now Jane is the subject that we're going to talk about, and then we can use wa to talk about her. So another rule with particle ga, and I have not been strict with this in previous videos, so technically you're not supposed to use particle wa when you're asking a question about a subject, when the subject of your question is an unknown, is a who, what, where, when, why, how. You're not supposed to generally use wa. There are exceptions, but for the purposes of this video, generally speaking, you're supposed to use ga in those instances. So here are just a couple examples. 誰が ニンジンを食べていますか? So that is who is eating carrots. Who is our subject and who is an unknown. Like we don't know who is eating carrots. Before we said ジェーンがニンジンを食べている. Like ジェーンがニンジンを食べています if you want to be polite. But in this case, we don't know who this subject is. It's unknown, 誰. So you use が and you're asking that question. Who is eating carrots? And then I could answer ジェーンがニンジンを食べている. And if I'm answering that question that was like who is eating carrots, then I also have to use が by extension. Here's another example with a different unknown word. So in this case, it's どの猫が一番かわいいですか? So どの, as you may remember from the kosoado video a long time ago, that means which. And then neko is cat, ga. Ichiban is number one or the most. And then kawaii, this means so many different things. And this is a great opportunity to teach you guys another meaning of kawaii. So you might know kawaii as just cute or sweet or lovable. But in this case, it can also mean like who you love. And this is typically used like to describe like a mother and her children or a father and his children or a mother and her cats. Saying どの猫が一番かわいいですか? If someone asked me that, it could be translated as which cat is the cutest, but it can also be translated as which of your cats do you love the most? So it actually kind of means both of those things. But anyway, which cat is the cutest or which cat do you love the most? And then I would answer, I just feel like such a bad cat parent for having a favorite, but I have a favorite. ハーマイオニーが一番かわいい. So we're asking the question with ga, we're answering the question with ga. So now a little bit more about particle wa, just to balance out this video a little bit so it's not entirely about ga. And I'll wait for that noisy car to go by. So for particle wa, you can also have a particle wa just kind of hanging at the end of a sentence. And it's not even really a sentence at that point, it's just like a sentence fragment. And the beauty of this is if you are learning Japanese, which you probably are if you're watching this video, you don't necessarily have all the vocabulary you want. You might want to ask a question about a noun, but you don't know the word for the adjective. Like if you wanted to ask, is this watch expensive or something, but you don't know the word for expensive and you know the word for watch, this is a great little hack to ask questions about things without using an adjective or a verb and just using the thing. So here is a question that we've already learned in a past video. 趣味は? And then in parentheses, 何ですか? But you can just say 趣味は? Question mark. And that also means really, what are your hobbies? What is your hobby? Literally what it means is sort of like, what about hobbies? Or what about your hobbies? Or as for your hobbies, ... Can you please tell me what they are? So you can just say 趣味は? Question mark. And boom, that's a question. What are your hobbies? And what this does, incidentally, is it lets the listener, the person that you're asking the question to basically just finish your sentence. If I say 趣味は? And then you could answer with 水泳です. Swimming. So I go, what's your hobby? You answer swimming. But literally, we together are composing a sentence. I'm saying, swimming. Your hobby is swimming. So it's kind of cool, this cooperative thing that Japanese people have in their language and in their culture. So if you wanted to ask someone about dogs, 犬は? So that could mean, do you like dogs? Do you have a dog? Do you eat dog? It can mean so many different things. And then given the context, you wouldn't just bust out 犬は out of nowhere. Again, like, what about the inu? Like, we weren't talking about an inu before. Why are you talking about this inu all of a sudden? But it's like, if someone else is talking about animals or something, or like, they're saying, oh yeah, I've got a mom and I've got a dad and I've got a brother and I've got a sister at home and I've got 2 cats and I've got a hamster. And I could go, inu wa? Like, oh, what about a dog? Like, do you have a dog? It's like, we're already talking about animals. Like, what about dogs? You could also say, ご飯は? To your roommate after they came home from work or something. And ご飯は? That can mean a number of different things. It can mean like, have you eaten yet? Do you want to eat? What do you want to eat for dinner? Do you need dinner? And basically it lets your roommate fill in the blank, complete that sentence basically. Your roommate could finish it with 外で食べた? Like, oh, I ate it out. Or まだ食べてない? Oh, I haven't had it yet. So that's a really cool application of wa. And as I mentioned earlier, there are other nuances of wa and ga, of course. And I'm honestly the wrong person to ask about that. You know, I'm good at picking up on these things when I read Japanese to translate it into English, but I'm not so good at picking up on these things if I'm like composing sentences into Japanese or if I'm like trying to explain these differences. But anyway, for a basic, you know, crash course in the difference between wa and ga, that was it. So moving on, I'd just like to finish up this lesson with just going over another application for ga. This happened a little bit later in the Genki textbook, but I forgot to note what page it was and I didn't feel like looking it up. But anyway, it's in there somewhere and it's just a useful use of ga. So ga can be used to combine a noun and an adjective to make sort of like a compound adjective. And you'll see a lot of these in the Japanese language, and I'm just going to give you a few examples. Here's one, se ga takai. So literally, se means like your back, and then takai is high or tall. Se ga takai altogether just means tall. Even though it literally means back is high, it just means tall. And it's to describe a person. You wouldn't say, ano biru se ga takai. Like that building over there is tall. Like, no, you wouldn't say that. You would describe a person, se ga takai, tall. And then the opposite, se ga hikui. Hikui means low, so back is low. It means short. Atama ga ii. This is a big one. So atama is head, ii is good. Atama ga ii means just smart. Got a good head on your shoulders. I mean, we kind of have that phrase in English, but atama ga ii, even though it literally is you have a good head, it really just means smart. Kokoro ga hiroi. So kokoro is your heart, mind, or soul, and then hiroi is wide or spacious. There's a lot of space in there. So kokoro ga hiroi, take a guess of what that means. It's a one-word adjective. It means generous. Here's another one. It's not like a one-word adjective, but it's very common. Kami ga nagai. So you use this to describe like a person's body parts in general. Kami ga nagai, long-haired. Yubi ga nagai, long-fingered. Another one, kao ga chitchai or kao ga chisai. That means you have a small, usually like a small thin face. And then that by extension means you have a pretty face, because in Japan they think if you have a fat face you're ugly. I think that maybe is changing a little bit finally, but there's still traces of that in there. Linguistic fat phobia. But yeah, kao ga chitchai or chisai and kao ga dekai, the opposite of that, like how you have a big face, you have a fat face. Kao ga chisai, that literally means your voice is small, but it actually means quiet. But quiet to describe a voice, quiet to describe a person. And then koi ga ookii, the opposite of that. Voice is big, but it just means loud. Here's another one, stailu ga ii. So this is a fake friend, a katakana. So stailu, you might think that means style, so you might think that that means that you have a good style, but that's not actually at all true. Style means slender, basically. Stailu ga ii means you're slender. More linguistic fat phobia. And here's a way that you can not use ga in these is if you remove the ga from these, it becomes like a phrase. So atama ga ii is like the adjective smart, but if I just say atama ii, like really excited, I'm saying, wow, you're smart. Or if I say kao chitchai, I'm like saying, wow, you have such a tiny, pretty face. So that's another thing to consider. If you can omit the ga, and it's a phrase now, and also sometimes an adjective. And then another note about not using ga with these adjective compounds, sometimes you can and should change it to a no. And here are two examples of that in action. So here's sentence number 1. Watashi no kareshi wa se ga takai. So we're talking about my boyfriend, and I'm like, watashi no kareshi wa, my boyfriend, as for my boyfriend, se ga takai. My boyfriend is tall, is basically what that means. However, if I am going to modify a noun with that adjective compound, notice in the first sentence I ended it with the compound, with the adjective compound. But if I'm going to use that to modify a noun, in this sentence, watashi wa se no takai hito ga suki. So I'm using se takai to describe now a noun, so it's not coming at the end of the sentence. So in this case, watashi wa se no takai, someone who is tall of height, basically. So you can also use no in this case, but only if it is coming before a noun. You wouldn't say, 私の彼氏は背の高い or 私の彼氏は背の高いです. You wouldn't say that, that's wrong. But you can use that no to modify a noun. And you can also leave it as ga as well, but just letting you know that that's a thing. And now we have come to the review section of this video. So I have timestamps in the video description and in a pinned comment at the top of the comments section. So click to whatever thing you want to listen to, and then you can practice it over and over again. Note, I'm not a native Japanese speaker, so my accent is not perfect, but you know, sometimes it's kind of easier for beginners to hear the words if a non-native speaker is saying them because it's kind of clearer in their brains. But anyway, yeah, do not learn all of your Japanese from me. If you are a beginner, consult other sources as well. And there are some other sources in the video description as well. 誰が人参を食べていますか? ジェーンが人参を食べています。どの猫が一番かわいいですか? 背が高い。背が低い、頭がいい、心が広い、髪が長い、声が小さい、声が大きい、顔がちっちゃい、顔がでかい、スタイルがいい、頭いい、顔ちっちゃい。私の彼氏は背が高い。私は背の高い人が好き。Thanks for watching! In the next lesson, we're going to cover the concepts of something and nothing and somewhere and nowhere with nani ka, nani mo, doko ka ni, and doko ni mo. Thank you to all the patrons who support this series and the other series on this channel. Just a quick note, I have discontinued Juku. I realized it just wasn't very sustainable for me to be giving feedback and going through a bunch of worksheets and grading people. If you are currently in Juku, stay in Juku if you want. I will keep giving you worksheets and grading your worksheets. But if you were thinking about joining Juku, sorry, it's closed. But the Genki tier is still open if you want to receive a weekly study guide. They're basically written components to these videos with a little bit more information in them. That's only $2 a month, so if you want that, go ahead and get that. Mata ne!